Would you like us to turn off our video? Is that better for reception?
You can just turn out your microphone maybe and leave the
Sure.
video if you want.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
I just want everyone to see I have my Biden-Harris good luck t-shirt on. Oh, we're all so nervous.
Yeah, good luck, Catherine. hopefully.
We have to win. We have to.
We are all with our thoughts and prayers directed to you, because I think that global democracy relies on a new president in USA. So
we have set a very bad example that others unfortunately are following. So I completely agree. We need to set a good example. Yep.
Okay. Maybe we can start now because it's already 2. So maybe you can all just turn off your microphone. So welcome to everyone. And my name is Julieta. I work for the global platform for the right to the city. So welcome to this webinar about cities as a common good. I will just go quickly to the translation part because we have a translator with us today. So if you want to have the presentation in Spanish or English, because we are going to use both languages, you have to go to the interpretation button on the Zoom application and then choose your language. If you want to avoid any issue, the best is to turn off the mute original audio option. Just turn it off. It will be the best option. I have the instructions always also in Spanish. So, para elegir el idioma que necesiten para la presentación, tienen que ir al botón que dice interpretación, donde hay un globo, y elegir el idioma que necesiten. Y lo más importante para que no haya ningún problema de traducción es que no esté la opción silenciar el audio original. Déjenla activado. Lo más, o sea, que no esté activado silenciar el audio original. Eso. Si tienen alguna pregunta, nos lo escriben por el chat y los ayudamos a resolverla. Ahora, algunas reglas solamente muy rápido para que este webinar pase de la mejor manera. Lo mejor es apagar el micrófono durante la presentación cuando no quieran hablar, así no hay interferencias. Les pedimos por favor que en el chat se presenten, nos digan su nombre, su organización, de dónde vienen, y si van a hablar también lo pueden hacer antes de empezar a hablar, decir quiénes son, así nos conocemos. Si tienen alguna pregunta o alguna intervención, la pueden escribir directamente en el chat, no se olviden, todo estará guardado y lo diremos. Y también pueden levantar la mano de manera virtual. Y cuando vayan a intervenir, traten de que sea algo súper conciso, así nos da tiempo para que todo el mundo pueda hablar, y al final vamos a grabar la reunión y les enviaremos las presentaciones. La agenda. Vamos a empezar con una introducción. Va a durar, el webinar va a durar aproximadamente 2 horas. Empezaremos con una introducción y luego habrá la presentación de Edesio y luego una parte de debate con preguntas que tenemos para ustedes y con todo lo que quieran decir. Le paso ahora la palabra a Nelson, así puede empezar con la introducción.
Good morning from Brazil. Thank you for joining this webinar. So the idea of this global platform, the Right to the City, to have thematic papers for this year, the next year, is to have a position document, regarding some thematic issues is necessary to go more deep regarding the perspective, the Right to the City platform. In this year, we have a process to elaborate 3 thematic papers by 3 colleagues consultants. One is actually the Right to the City and the A City Como Go by the colleague Edesio Fernándes. The another is the Right to the City and Climate Change. And the consultant is Álvaro Puerta. And the last is the Right to the City and the COVID-19 for the consultant is Eva Garcia Cueca. Tuesday we have the webinar about this thematic paper. So we decided to elaborate these papers for 2 main purposes. We have experience during the Habitat 3 process regarding the policy paper. Many colleagues, I think I remember, this thematic policy paper was important to have the main issues to include in the new urban agenda. One exactly was about the Right to the City, was very important to have the vision in the new urban agenda regarding the Right to the City. In the other experience we have last year in the USLG Congress, also we have a possibility to elaborate some policy papers with some organizations from the global platform, the Right to the City. One is about the Right to the City again, and it was important this policy paper to have recommendations and register initiatives to have a dialogue, especially with the local authorities. According to this experience, we want to use exactly this thematic paper for 2 main proposals. One is advocacy. We are doing many works with advocacy in the global platform, the Right to the City, with the organism of the human rights in the United Nations. We are now having a process, the advocacy with the new UN Special Reporters, human rights, with the Human Rights Council, and the other UN agency, special UN Habitat, during these years. And also with the local governments and the perspective of the national and local governments. Now we go to have a good example. We go to collaborate with some organizations in Chile to the process to elaborate the new constitution, to have inputs regarding the perspective of the human rights to be included in the new constitution of the Chile. The another is about the training and research for capacity building to disseminate, the more clarifications, some important issues regarding the platform of the Right to the City, the view of the Right to the City. We are having this moment 2 research. One is in Asia region, with this Kota Kita Foundation, Indonesia, some organizations in China, and in South Korea, the International Center of Guangzhou, and also the colleagues from Haru Commission in Philippines. And also in this working group, the gender, we are having a mapping of human and feminist organization work with the Right to the City. We also have some initiatives, the research regarding Right to the City and gender. Also to train capacity building. No, some events. No, we have organizing training sessions. And it's very important for us, no, the dissemination, the right to the city, using training capacity building activities. In the end of this month, beginning in December, we go to have an initiative, one-line course about the right to the city. So this is the the proposal, no, for we have these thematic papers.
Thank you very much, Nelson. We can now go to the Edesio's presentation. Edesio, do you want to? I stop my sharing my screen, so you can go. Yes, go ahead.
So hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I was invited to contribute to this process by writing a paper on a very exciting new topic, which is the city as a common good. It is also a difficult topic. So I have some apologies to make. It's a very first draft, incomplete. It's a work in progress. And I know that I need to develop the arguments, revise the language, include references, also making a clear link to the international documents and others that to some extent have recognized this component, the city as a common good, as well as adapting the paper to the format of the terms of reference. But my approach is perhaps a little more theoretical than the ones employed in the two other thematic papers, because the topic is more abstract and it's perhaps the least developed of the three topics. But I'm sure that by including references to concrete cases, to case studies, perhaps through boxes, I'll be able to find a better balance between a theoretical approach and a more, pragmatic understanding of this topic. But my choice of perspective is what I call a critical social legal perspective. I think it's a fundamental approach. The discussion on the right to the city, to my mind, needs more legal emphasis. It is a very strong social political discussion, but it still lacks more emphasis on the legal implications, the legal ramifications of this notion. So the paper was written in the spirit that we have to make a more precise legal use of a number of concepts so that the right to the city can gain more meaning, more depth, and more power. Yeah, and also I took some initial inspiration from Henri Lefebvre's work, but I have also naturally included many references from more contemporary writers and thinkers on this issue. My general argument is that the nature of the right to the city has been gradually discussed, and several of its components have gained more meaning over the years. But it is still fundamentally a social political notion, a philosophical platform, a social political banner. In legal terms, I think the right to the city is still a problematic notion, although I do recognize that it has been gradually nominally recognized by national laws and other documents, like in Mexico, like in Ecuador, like in Brazil, and other cases as well. Some of the components of the right to the city have also gained further recognition in international and national documents. For example, participation. Yesterday, I read that Mexico is considering including the right to mobility in the Mexican Constitution. So they have been given a more consistent legal nature as well. However, per se, these components, they do not define the right to the city. I would argue that we still need to achieve some degree of enforceability. Enforcement is a basic requirement of the legal order, and that remains a challenge insofar as the right to the city is concerned. The city as a common good is an increasingly popular component of this right, still largely unexplored, especially from this social legal perspective that I'm proposing. So I think that the broader discussion on the right to the city would enormously benefit from a legal treatment of this notion so that it could become more enforceable. So it's not a new notion. Common good is a traditional socio-political as well as ethical notion, often taken as public interest to be determined by the state, especially in representative democracy contexts. We are talking in political terms about this relational link among citizens to preserve matters of common interest and the nominal obligation of the state authorities. But also in legal terms, there is a traditional notion of goods of common use by the people. In some legal systems, streets, beaches are referred to as goods of common use, generally to indicate that they have a specific function and also to guarantee open access to these elements. In some countries, we still have commons in the prevailing land structure. Many, however, have lost this notion, especially in the Iberian tradition, where the notion of the baldío doesn't mean much in recent times. But I think that there's a more contemporary take on the notion of the common good, which could be found in this growing movement affirm the notion of the common or of the commons, which has become the subject of an increasing social political mobilization internationally as a reaction against two intertwined dominant paradigms. The paradigm that affirms absolute private property rights, thus leading to the commodification of land, property, natural resources, and of the city, and the paradigm that affirms exclusive representative democracy mechanisms to the exclusion of the majority of the population, especially in a context in which the state has been increasingly captured by the private sector. So this movement proposes more emphasis on use values and rights, collective interests and rights, preservation, redistribution, and sustainability. So as you may be following, we have a wealth of manifestations, publications, movements affirming the importance of giving some consistency to this notion of the common or the commons. It's still considered largely as a social political notion, this fight for the common good. But I do believe that this movement also allows for a broader social legal take on the notion of the city as a common good. What we know is that unregulated economic globalization, unfettered financial capitalism, and elitist social political liberalism have combined to make cities, the arena and the object of unqualified capital accumulation, thus leading to the global urban crisis that we are facing now. So the city as a collective creation, this is one of the main notions that I develop in the paper, but the question is how to guarantee that the wealth produced in cities by all is appropriated, distributed fairly, and equitably among all. So again, we have a growing movement emphasizing this notion that the city should be viewed as commons or as a common good. And there are some social legal requirements for this exercise, which I don't have the time to detail here, but just to emphasize. I mean, we need to have another look at the tradition of human rights to give meaning to the notion of the right to the city, because the tradition we have now is still fundamentally constrained by the notion of individual rights. They have been updated so as to incorporate economic, social, and cultural rights to be recognized through state action, but we are still within the realm of individual rights. We need to include a set of collective rights expressing contemporary citizenship rights not yet updated. That part of the Declaration of Rights of Men and Citizens, this part on the citizenship rights has not been updated yet. So it is crucial to emphasize the importance of human rights in the city. It is fundamental to promote human rights cities, but we still have to emphasize the importance of human rights to the city as a collective right, the right to the city as a collective right. And for that, we should be discussing the terms of a new social citizenship contract for the city, one in which the public order is broader than the state order. So yes, we have to improve political representation. Yes, we have to widen popular participation, but we also have to recognize direct community action in many ways, as well as wealth redistribution and land value capture mechanisms. So for that purpose, in the paper, I'll be discussing three main intertwined dimensions. The importance of a land governance framework to give legal meaning to the notions of the social function of habitat, social function of property, social value of land. Also the need for the incorporation of urban commons, communal land, rights to roam in the land structure, and the importance of a shared common power, combined. I think these three elements, they provide the basis for what I'm calling this new social political contract for the city, never losing sight of this utopian horizon proposed by Lefebvre of collective autonomy and self-management. So I don't have time to go into any detail, but in the paper, I have a number of issues, a number of topics, a number of case studies to give meaning to this notion of the land governance framework, so that we can promote a significant shift in the paradigm which is prevailing internationally. A number of ideas, strategies, processes which are fundamental for this change in the way land, property, resources in the city have been considered by the dominant paradigm so far. Interesting experiences, cooperatives, community land trusts, social housing production by several actors, social rental schemes, land readjustment, new development and constructions with emphasis on the preservation of cultural values and many interesting examples in local administrations such as Paris, Barcelona, Berlin, and others internationally. In the paper also I have a part, which I don't have time to discuss here, but to give meaning to this notion of the shared common power, this idea that the public order is broader than the state order. All that is statal is public, but not all that is public is statal. So I'll be discussing some ongoing strategies and experiments of community involvement, of community planning, of community participation in decision-making processes, as well as other forms of community action. I have a number of examples from the participation in urban planning, from including the important process in Mexico that led to the Mexico City Constitution. In Montreal, in Brazil, we have a number of interesting examples. Bologna in Italy has been calling itself an urban commons laboratory. There's a whole of ideas, especially emphasizing the importance of food production and preservation of water resources. Cities like Ghent have even came up with a new organization so that they can promote this transition, what they call a commons transition plan for the city. So there's a lot going on internationally, and I'll be exploring that to some extent. And finally, I came up with one proposal for discussion, thinking especially of the challenges resulting from COVID, future pandemics, and climate change. I think that if our intentions, aspirations, and claims are to be concrete, they need to be territorialized. So the importance of a territorial organization is crucial. The articulation of all sorts of public policies with the underlining land policy, I think it justifies what I'm calling the collective right to territorial organization, with a number of requirements: territorial responsibility, the need for an adequate legal, political, institutional apparatus. Very often, what we call local is no longer municipal. It is at least metropolitan. And if we include a more environmentally based criterion, like the preservation of water resources, then we should be considering the sphere of the river basins, the importance of capturing back for the community the wealth collectively produced through value capture mechanisms. And also in this context, there's an enormous scope for direct community action. We are talking about a non-renewable resource that cannot be wasted any longer. So basically, I'll be exploring a number of new community-led processes happening everywhere, in which community organization strategies have been complementing, if not replacing, the action by traditional state mechanisms. My question is, these are such vibrant political processes, full of promises, but they are often deemed to be illegal, and thus they are repressed instead of gaining scale and being replicated. So is this a natural order of things, or can it be changed? Why are they illegal, and how can the legal order embrace them? That goes for this vibrant community mobilization in shanty towns in the context of COVID, for this amazing phenomenon of urban agriculture in the context of informal settlements all over in Latin America, in Africa, and in Asia, for this amazing process of community land trusts, which is coming up with the different arrangements to materialize the right to housing, community involvement through cooperatives and other forms of participation to come up with a number of solutions for people's basic needs. So inclusion, this is one of my my favorite examples. In fact, the way the organized community has come up with community planning so that they can create their own housing and their own space in cities. So, this is basically what I'm trying to achieve in the paper. And the three questions that I'd like to discuss with you is how to give a more concrete legal meaning to the right to the city, going beyond the traditional social political discussion. What could be a contemporary social legal take on the notion of the city as a common good? And how can a land and territorial governance framework give meaning, especially a legal meaning, to the notion of the city as a common good? Thank you. So I'd be very grateful for your comments and suggestions and all that.
Thank you very much.
You have the paper and you have the PowerPoint as well, right? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Edesio, for this presentation. It was just the perfect time, perfect timing. So now we have the second part of the webinar, where we have asked Edesio to think about three questions he would like to make to you yes. So I will share my screen. I have the questions in both Spanish and English, so it will be easier. So the first one is how to give a more concrete legal meaning to the right to the city. So now you can just, oh, sorry. I'm sorry. You can just raise your hand or ask us in the chat if you want to say something. I will give you the floor. And then you can talk in Spanish or English. And yes, or just give us your impressions, your questions, and you can also write on the chat all this.
Or maybe, Juliet, if you want to, give them the 3 questions at once,
Of
and
course.
people would be more free to,
Yes. The other question we had was, what could a contemporary sociolegal take on the notion of the city as a common good be? So here you can give us also your examples of actions and initiatives you have led and that you think that are linked to the city as a common good. And the third question was, how can a land and territorial governance framework give a legal meaning to the notion of the city as a common good? And here also, if you have examples of actions or initiatives that you have led, you can go ahead and share them with us. And yes, I can see everyone with them. I don't know if anyone is.
Well, I can start. I was going to wait. It's Catherine. That's okay. Lieta, is it okay?
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Okay, I just first of all wanted to thank you. It was extremely, for me, as somebody relatively new to this whole topic, only relatively, I mean, it makes sense to me, but it was an extremely useful way, and I think you did yourself a disservice with all of your apologies. It was very well written. I had a question and then just a couple of comments. The question is, there's almost seems to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, a presumption, because it fits with your first question, presumption that democratically the people will make a very good decision of the definition of how cities can become a common good. But we all know there are plenty of people like my president, Trump, who believe that the common good is what he defined. So I agree with you that legislation makes a difference, but the real issue to me is A, wresting power from those that make up the rules now, and B, how do we make sure that those new regulations, rules, concepts are as we describe them, not as other people do. And then the two sort of suggestions is, in my world as a nonprofit representing older persons, I just wanted to make sure you knew about the NGO major group that deals specifically with the common good. And if not, I can put you in touch with the woman or the 2 people who are most involved with that, because I think it would be extremely helpful to you. But thank you. This makes so much sense together. And again, I reread the town hall paper on the right to the city. And I feel that that together with yours really helps explain to people like me who don't know the ins and outs of what you all have been dealing with in a really good, comprehensive way. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. We have 2 other people that were asking some questions on the chat, Graciela y Claudia. If you want, Graciela, you can take the floor. And also Temba, that was here and that was just turn on the microphone, Temba, if you want to start. If you have to leave, then.
Hello. Thank you for this, and thank you to Edesio for the fantastic paper and presentation. My own research led me to to argue for the right to the city as reframing the urban as public. And I think this idea of the common good is very useful way of taking the right to the city forward. I also agree with the need to have greater legal clarity or legal direction. And my question is about, especially in contexts where there's a lot of marginalized groups who might have different competing claims on space, how do we manage collective rights in that way without privileging one group over another? I think that's more or less my question.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we'll have one more intervention and then Edesio can maybe answer or say something if he wants to. We have Claudia Ponce. ¿Quieres tomar la palabra? Y después dejamos a Edesio responder y Mari Carmen puede intervenir.
Hola, buenos días o buenas tardes. ¿Qué tal? Claudia Ponce del Colegio de Jurisprudencia Urbanística en México. Bueno, estaba comentando justamente que nosotros no hemos trabajado una legislación como tal o desde la legislación nacional, no hemos trabajado el hecho del derecho a la ciudad como un espacio público, espacio común o espacio colectivo, sino más bien lo hemos hecho desde la acción. En este caso, por ejemplo, nosotros contamos con un programa con una organización hermana desde Indonesia, en el cual se maneja el derecho al deporte, el derecho a la salud y el derecho al uso de estos espacios comunes, colectivos o comunes, ¿no? ¿Cómo lo hemos hecho? Se han hecho ejercicios o trabajos en espacios públicos, en espacios comunes, con la ciudadanía, ¿sí? No hemos hecho grupos específicos, al contrario, llegamos a un parque, a un estadio común, abierto, y entonces ahí es donde se realizan este deporte con respecto al Wing Chun. Mucha gente al principio nos toma locos, pero poco a poco se van integrando estos grupos y al final se hace una explicación de cómo es que se han estado utilizando el derecho al deporte, a la salud, al bien común, al espacio abierto para todo tipo de persona. Incluso se han integrado personas con discapacidad y eso nos hace más fuertes en cuanto a el uso también del derecho a la integralidad, al espacio seguro, ¿sí? Porque hemos contado afortunadamente con la protección el espacio de la policía municipal en el cual, bueno, ha estado protegiéndonos. Esto, lo que nosotros también hemos hecho es que dentro de estos eventos que organizamos ya como pensadores urbanos, lo utilizamos como ejemplo para decir, no necesariamente necesitamos tener programas o grupos conformados desde el gobierno para poder hacer uso de estos espacios y manejar el derecho al acceso o a la accesibilidad de la ciudad, sino que también lo hemos manejado desde el punto de vista que nosotros mismos como ciudadanos podemos hacer uso de estos espacios y cuidarnos o protegernos. Más que nada ahora en la pandemia, pues bueno, es algo que muy probablemente no lo quieran llevar a cabo o no se pretenda este uso. Sin embargo, se puede hacer. Se puede hacer con todo y la sana distancia, con todo y la protección que nosotros nos han comentado desde nuestros gobiernos. Sin embargo, creo que sí es necesario, y lo comparto con Catherine, creo que fue la primera intervención, que estas definiciones de espacio público, espacio común, espacio abierto, creo que sí tiene que estar muy bien delimitado y definido en nuestras legislaciones, porque eso nos lleva a tener por lo menos una idea más clara, ¿sí? Más en conjunto de qué significa, cuál es el significado real del concepto. Porque muchas veces grupos independientes, no necesariamente organizaciones, sino grupos que se han formado, sobre todo de jóvenes en la actualidad, lo han utilizado como, incluso al uso del derecho a la expresión, como actos vandálicos. Y eso creo que sí debería de estar muy bien protegido, muy bien cuidado por nuestros gobiernos. Muchas gracias, Edesio. Agradecemos mucho la intervención. Creo que esto es uno de los temas más complejos que se puedan utilizar en cuestiones de ciudad, en cuestiones de organización, inclusive en cuestiones de gobernanza. Muy amable, gracias.
Muchas gracias, Claudia. A ver, tenemos varias intervenciones. Edesio para después. Ok. Hay Adriana que escribió algunas cosas en el chat. No sé si sigue por aquí, pero si no, vamos a ir a Mari Carmen. Y después, bueno, Adriana si sigue por aquí. Graciela que escribió algunas cosas en el chat. Las vamos a leer si desea o puede tomar la palabra. Y después Giovanni. Mari Carmen, adelante.
Hola, muchas gracias. Edesio, me parece que realmente tocó una tarea muy difícil porque son temas muy abstractos y cuando comenzaste a hablar dije, uy, yo no sé qué puedo aportar en esto, pero mientras fuiste hablando me surgieron muchas ideas y creo que eso es lo interesante de estos espacios, ¿no? Que nos obliga a pensar de manera metódica en cuestiones que vamos trabajando en nuestro día a día. Y entonces apunté varias cosas que tienen que ver con las dificultades que...
Please just turn off the mic if you're not speaking. I don't know what happened. Mari Carmen, adelante.
Vale, gracias. Bueno, entonces un poco en la línea de lo que explicaba anteriormente la colega, es que creo que realmente a veces la dificultad de generar un cambio legal o una definición local puede ser como un elemento paralelo a la búsqueda de esta definición, pero sí es interesante también una definición amplia que nos permite ir avanzando, porque es muy lento luego de implementar en cada país. Y en ese sentido pensaba, escuché la presentación en inglés y luego pensaba en castellano y en la legislación. Yo estoy en España y en Chile. Entonces, cómo los conceptos de común, colectivo o público realmente no son sinónimos porque están muy relacionados con la propiedad. Entonces, yo creo que una primera definición o una búsqueda que podríamos hacer o explicarlo a partir de la propiedad, pero una de las cosas que siempre he tratado de entender es que no necesitamos ser dueños como Estado para generar esta idea común de la ciudad, ¿no? Y eso es algo interesante en términos legales porque siempre se habla de lo público que es propiedad del Estado, ¿no? Entonces era un elemento. El segundo, dos aspectos relacionados con cómo se puede avanzar en esta definición, y yo creo que lo que plantea Edesio es fundamental, que son estos derechos humanos en la ciudad, ¿no? Y que los derechos humanos, si bien son individuales, en un espacio físico, en unas dinámicas territoriales, solo pueden ser de manera colectiva, siempre van a implicar una afectación colectiva. Entonces yo creo que esa es una manera en la que se puede insistir, que compartimos un mismo espacio, ¿no? Y desde esta misma idea de ese espacio compartido, que la desigualdad y la segregación socioespacial de nuestras ciudades demuestra la necesidad de un nuevo abordaje desde lo común, y tener mucho cuidado con de que el derecho a la ciudad no sea solo para algunos, sino que sea para todos, ¿no? Porque pasa muchas veces en estos discursos modernos de la ciudad de los 15 minutos, sí, va muy bien para las ciudades históricas, ¿no? Donde históricamente están todos los bienes, pero ¿qué pasa con las periferias, ¿no? ¿Qué pasa con las ciudades medianas? Entonces yo creo que eso, y finalmente, similar a lo que ya se había planteado anteriormente, creo que es interesante incorporar esta idea de la educación fuertemente, porque una participación, si no es con una ciudadanía que realmente tiene acceso, conócela, es muy difícil. Nosotros vemos procesos de participación muy cooptados por los intereses, modificaciones legales participativas, pero que han sido cooptadas por los intereses. Entonces, también como insistir en este proceso. Y también sobre la diversidad de los ciudadanos, ¿no? Un poco Catherine ya lo decía, pero también en esta ciudad que es para distintas edades. Siempre la ciudad fordista, la ciudad capitalista está pensada para una persona que en edad de trabajo, ¿no? En edad productiva y reproductiva, pero ¿qué pasa con todas las otras, ¿no? Y bueno, y que eso también nos obliga a pensar la ciudad en una complejidad más amplia, ¿no? Es eso.
Muchas gracias, María Carmen. Adriana me parece que salió ya, tenía que salir, pero dejó sus preguntas en el chat. Vamos a pasar quizás a Graciela, que también puso una pregunta en el chat sobre cómo actuar en las ciudades consolidadas, ejemplo desde Argentina, que tienen un concepto de bien común en la Constitución, para intervenir para usos públicos, para bienes que sean imprescindibles para la ciudadanía. Y de lo que entendí, ellos actúan de manera cooperativa con urbanizaciones y asentamientos precarios, pero ¿cómo se puede hacer en las ciudades que ya están consolidadas? Bueno, no sé, Edesio, si quieres responder ahora alguna de estas intervenciones. Hay varias cosas, sí.
Well, thank you all so much for your comments and, for the attention you paid to the paper and to the presentation. I mean, I don't have answers as such. I mean, I'm just paying attention to what you have to say. And I think we are basically in total agreement here that we have to rethink a lot of, our assumptions regarding power, regarding land, regarding the process of city, making, in fact, right? I mean, and my own contribution is to emphasize the need for a better understanding of the way the law works. I mean, both in terms of determining the conditions that we face now of exclusion, unsustainability, and segregation, but also the possibilities that redefined legal order could create to promote inclusion, a level of, more fairness and a more equitable treatment of all the resources involved. So basically, power, land, and law. These are the three aspects that I'm trying to discuss in the paper. Not everything in the law is tangible. Not everything can be given a very precise meaning. But I think we have to make an effort to go beyond the mere declaration of intentions, right? I mean, especially insofar as international laws are concerned, to give a more concrete legal meaning so that rights can be demanded, rights can be, recognized instead, and especially in order to open a room for more direct community participation. I think that's the sole way we can promote a shift in this paradigm, which is so exclusionary. You see, I mean, go beyond the reduction of the public order to the state order. One dimension is that has to do with this element that was emphasized, the importance of public spaces and open spaces and green areas, that of course, that's of fundamental importance. More and more, you see municipalities emphasizing the need also for a better use of public land from the viewpoint of housing production or agricultural production or preservation of natural resources. But it's more than that. I think we cannot think only in terms of specific aspects, like, for example, community land trusts. They're fabulous, but they're even better when they are part of a broader articulated land governance framework. And I came up with a number of issues. So I'm trying to put together all these elements, because otherwise we have a very fragmented approach to what is essentially a very organic process of production of space in cities. So basically, to promote the shift from individual rights to collective rights, to property rights, to possessive rights, to human rights as collective rights. Also in terms of the political decision-making, the notion that society is not only made of individuals or state authorities, but also of groups, communities, and they should have a clearly defined role in the process of political decision-making, right? And community planning, for example. There's an enormous room for community plan to promote, housing, to promote the protection of the environment, and even in consolidated cities, as was mentioned here before. I know quite a few interesting strategies. You go to some of the districts in Paris now, very dense, with no public spaces. They are now promoting the articulation of negotiations with landowners so that they give up whatever land they have in the back of their houses. And a number of small but important public spaces have been created through this kind of arrangement. In other contexts of informal settlements, for example, land readjustment programs have been successful in creating more public spaces, but it all involves a broader framework, in which this combination of aspects is taken into account. I think there's a lot to be achieved, but we have to go beyond these strategies, initiatives, which are very small in scale. They don't change anything structurally. They cannot be easily replicated, and very often they're considered to be illegal. So, what kind of redefined, widened legal order, urban legal order, can accommodate this set of strategies, initiative processes led by the community, together with, a different process of state-led planning and decision-making, which is more compatible with the needs of inclusion, housing promotion, protection of cultural values, environmental resources, and all that. So to find a balance there is crucial. I think it's an enormous challenge, and I like this banner of the city as a common good, as a way of giving this meaning to an otherwise fragmented and a little loose notion of the right to the city. But I'll stop here because I'm more interested in listening to what you have to say.
Yes, we have Giovanni Allegretti that wanted to take the floor, and then David Bodinier.
Now, my intervention is maybe a little bit less useful after the answer that already Edesio gave, but I'm in this moment in Greenland, which is one of those countries where land is public, so it does not exist private land. And I'm tasting every day. I'm sorry, there is a hurricane today. If I disappear, is because the hurricane will take the internet away. So just to know, 150 kilometers per hour. So it's a little bit difficult. But I'm testing here a difference, a difficulty in the relation between something that we normally consider in itself a good thing. So having the land declared as land of the people, not land of the state, But at the same time, the articulation with participation represent a problematic thing here. The land use different mechanism of random selection for the individuals and participatory processes for approving the type of transformation proposed by enterprises. This did not exist until 2015, was a change in the law because enterprises blackmailed the state saying, we will not invest if you don't give a specific space to do our proposal. And naturally, this issue of the land is related to infrastructure, the networks of water, electricity. So it's not enough to have land of the people, not to have phenomena of gentrification and other things that are happening regularly here. So I wanted to propose maybe deepening the study in some of the countries where still land is public to understand which are the limits of a certain ideology that we have, that this is a good starting point. I'm also sure that is a good starting point, but alone is not enough, no? So maybe we could try to understand through this country, what are the articulation, the challenges, what we can do in order to improve the effectiveness of the land in public or better in citizen hands. On the other side, I have been working in the last years in baldios, so in areas which are of collective land for the populations in Portugal. We have 1,400 areas, but the majority of these areas are dead in terms of community because for a long time they have been administrated by public institutions which conflict with the communities because they want the power on the land. So they manage the land in the name of communities, but in reality they do their own business. Their desire of publicization, it's a pre-desire of privatization. So I think that it's very interesting to analyze these cases and see the articulation between some of the concepts that Edesio was putting at stake. And I thank him very much for this capacity of focusing on the problem, because in the end, he gave some solution visualizing the need of having concrete cases that show us that the ecosystem between land governance and other factor is the one that determines the possibility of having the city considered as a commons or not. So I think we are on the right way, exactly because the first thing that Edesio did was to point out the limits of the right to the city and the limit of conceiving the commons. So the two things together will help us to be less theoretical and look to the cases as a possibility to imagine path, no, for solving, putting together some of these dimension, good possible solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Giovanni. David, go ahead. And then we have Norberto.
Sí, hola. Soy David Gabriel del Taller Popular de Urbanismo en la ciudad de Grenoble, en Francia. Disculpa para mi lenguaje en español. No tengo bastante las palabras para exprimir en inglés. Pienso el primero, bueno, disculpa también, es desde mi perspectiva de Francia, y tenemos aquí un debate sobre el derecho a la vivienda, y el derecho a la ciudad y los comunes, y yo lo siento que es una perspectiva que tengo aquí en Francia y no puede ser generalizada, pero voy a intentar de aportar mi contribución al debate. Pienso, el primero es que debemos pensar sobre la diferencia entre el bien común y el común. Y la diferencia entre los comunes, los bienes comunes, y me parece que no es exactamente la misma perspectiva. Si pensamos con Benjamin Correa, que es un economista aquí en Francia que intenta de pensar sobre los comunes, la principal diferencia entre el común y el bien común es que el común intenta de tener un sistema de gobernanza sobre los recursos y el sistema de derecho o el marco legal que podemos pensar sobre los recursos. Entonces, los bienes comunes en general son un recurso que tiene un sistema legal o de obligación de hacer cosas sobre estos recursos, pero que no tiene realmente una gobernanza. Y el pensamiento de los comunes o del nuevo movimiento de los comunes o del procomún es de pensar más sobre el sistema de gobernanza y la autogestión o la gestión comunitaria de los recursos. Claro que hay diferentes perspectivas y hay un debate sobre estas dos nociones, pero podemos intentar de profundizar sobre esto. Yo prefiero hablar de la ciudad como as common, no solo en commons goods, pero hay que pensar entre nosotros como nuestra orientación. Con David Harvey pensamos que el común viene de nuestra forma de actuar y de vivir en la ciudad y nuestro uso del espacio y las formas de vivir y de actuar juntos en la ciudad en sí misma produce el común y es esto que este valor que las empresas y el Estado, y algunas veces no por el Estado, pero las empresas y con la complicidad algunas veces del Estado intentan de capturar este value, el valor de nuestra forma de vivir y de actuar y de producir la ciudad. Y al nivel legal, pienso que tenemos dos diferentes perspectivas que puede ser una estrategia con los dos, pero hay que pensar un por abajo, la otra por arriba. Por abajo es intentar de tener una influencia al nivel del reconocimiento del común, al nivel constitucional o de los derechos abstractos, al nivel de los derechos humanos y de todas las libertades de vivir, las libertades de vivir en buenas condiciones en la ciudad, del derecho a la vivienda y todo el marco legal de los derechos. La otra perspectiva es partir de una estrategia jurisprudencial, de ejemplo, de experimentación que podemos tener en las diferentes ciudades y consolidar estas experiencias o experimentación al nivel legal con una jurisprudencia de nuestras experiencias. Por eso aquí intentamos de crear un laboratorio de apoyo jurídico para los comunes, para intentar de ayudar a los activistas que intentan de tener experiencias y ver cómo estas experiencias, sobre todo a partir de la influencia sobre la política municipal, podemos avanzar dentro de una estrategia legal. Y con este laboratorio tenemos un proyecto también a nivel europeo, al mínimo, que es Horizon Común, que es un proyecto de debate sobre los comunes y los comunes urbanos. Para acabar, y porque hay muchas personas que quieren hablar, pienso, me parece que hay una nueva generación que intenta de ir más allá de la democracia participativa, que es más radical, de una generación que intenta de tener experiencia de democracia directa. Pienso, por ejemplo, en nuestra experiencia aquí en Grenoble sobre el referéndum de iniciativa ciudadana, que intenta a partir del referéndum local de tener una democracia directa sobre los proyectos urbanos con votos, que los habitantes pueden votar sobre el proyecto que quieren y hacer un reconocimiento de este voto. Y también pienso que debemos pensar sobre los comunes digitales y la influencia de los comunes digitales y las ciudades, porque muchos servicios públicos como la movilidad, por ejemplo, ahora están gestionadas con una influencia del digital y debemos pensar a cómo podemos crear comunes digitales para que no son los GAFAM que gestionan la ciudad por el futuro.
Gracias, David, por la experiencia francesa. Ahora, del otro lado del Atlántico, Norberto quería compartir lo que se está haciendo en Bariloche. Adelante.
¿Se me escucha? ¿Me escuchan? ¿Hola?
Sí, se escucha.
Sí, Norberto.
El grupo es el Observatorio por el Derecho a la Ciudad, y lo que comentaba ahí un poquito brevemente por escrito es que ya hace un tiempo que tenemos un problema grave de falta de tierra para la gente de menores recursos, y
Puedes
lo que se ha
hablar un poco
producido...
más despacio porque está muy, muy bajo el volumen. ¿Sí?
Se ha producido digamos, una invasión de varios lugares donde varias familias han ocupado tierras en espacios públicos para instalarse, aunque sea temporalmente, a los fines de instalar una carpa con una familia, con sus hijos, o pequeñas viviendas muy precarias, por una cuestión muy simple. No tienen forma de pagar un alquiler, no pueden, no tienen dinero para pagar un alquiler. Y esto se ha explotado con el COVID, ¿no? A causa del COVID, esto se ha incrementado muy velozmente. Es un problema histórico. Históricamente, esta ciudad, y yo creo que muchas ciudades del mundo, existía. Pero Bariloche en particular tiene la característica de que es una ciudad turística, muy demandada por la inversión para hotelería, cabañas, construcciones turísticas, con muchos lugares de belleza natural, de paisaje, que es otro tema del bien común al que deberíamos abordar, pero entre una preferencia de tratar el cuidado del paisaje y del ambiente ante una situación actual de crítica donde los habitantes no tienen donde esto toma prioridad. Y es imposible, digamos, solucionar el tema desde el punto de vista de que los valores comerciales del mercado se vuelven inaccesibles para la mayoría de la población. Ni para comprar, ni para alquilar. Con mucha gente que está desocupada en estas condiciones de COVID, sobre todo, pero que habitualmente sucede que en las ciudades turísticas los trabajos son temporales. Pueden 4 meses y después están 3, 4 meses sin nada y tienen que sobrevivir. Así que esa es la situación que por lo menos estamos viviendo nosotros, y desde el municipio lo que vemos es que quieren dar una solución desde una perspectiva, yo diría, incluso financiera o empresaria, donde lo que ofrecen es créditos a gente que tiene que tener un ingreso. O sea, ¿cómo voy como gobierno a solucionar un problema de tierra y vivienda ofreciendo créditos donde requiero que tengan un ingreso mínimo y la gente está desocupada? Esto es la situación que estamos viviendo hoy, y noticias, les digo, de ayer, de hoy, que está dando los gobiernos, incluso a nivel del estado, digamos, de la provincia, no de la ciudad, un plan de tierras en toda la provincia, porque esto eclosionó a nivel provincia y del país de Argentina, pero en nuestro caso, en la Patagonia, están tratando de solucionarlo, como les digo, con un financiamiento que requiere un ingreso mínimo de las personas. Yo creo que por ahí habría que apuntar, como decían algunos de los que hablaron, como Giovanni u otros, de en algún punto tenemos que pensar la tierra como un bien común, y desde el grupo estamos planteando la posibilidad, que creo que en otros lugares lo hay, donde la tierra no sea propiedad privada solamente, sino que algunas parcelas, algunos sectores se puedan destinar sin entregar un título, como una concesión durante 30, 40 años, a un precio muy bajo, lo cual podría regular el precio de mercado y facilitaría el acceso a la gente sin que se la regalen, ¿sí? Sino que pagando un precio muy bajo, y la propiedad se mantendría en poder del Estado, digamos, durante el largo plazo, para que después por ahí lo hereden los hijos, se lo pasen a los hijos, o la gente se traslade a otra ciudad y deje el lugar vacante. No sé, eso nada más. Gracias.
Muchas gracias por este otro ejemplo en Argentina. Edesio, ¿quieres tomar la palabra un momento, decir algo a
Sí,
los...
Sí, porque son tantos comentarios tan fascinantes y tan provocativos también, ¿no? Bueno, me encantaron las contribuciones y de alguna manera voy a intentar incorporar todo en el borrador, el próximo borrador del paper, pero me gusta mucho la idea de la propuesta de Giovanni. No estoy hablando necesariamente que toda la tierra tiene que ser público del pueblo. Sorry, I'm speaking in Spanish. Thank you very much for all the fascinating, thought-provoking comments, and I'll take them all on board, and I'll try to incorporate them all into the next, draft of the paper. And I'm learning a lot, and I'm paying attention. And as Giovanni pointed out, I think it's not only a matter of how the land is defined. I mean, it's also who can make decisions, right? So this combination of land and power is crucial. So it's one element that I think we should go back to, which applies to every single nation state, is the notion of eminent domain. So in theory, at least in theoretical legal terms, it is the community of a given country that has the eminent domain over the whole territory to be exercised through the state apparatus. So, that's how, for example, we can justify expropriation. It is in the name of the public interest. So we have to rescue this dimension that ultimately, the organization of the territory, the appropriation of the resources, the distribution of the resources requires a more inclusive, a more participatory, political process within a broader governance framework that I'm suggesting here about the Baudillo element that Giovanni mentioned, I think also helps me to answer David. In fact, I mean, of course, there's a difference between common good and common. And I mentioned that the notion of the common good is a traditional one. It has existed for a long time. But it's not that it doesn't have governance. It has another form of governance. But we can update, we can give it a different political quality. Basically, the Baudillo is a good example, because whereas in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, we still have the urban commons, which historically were land or plots of land or tracts of land where the communities could use the resources and all that. In the more Latin tradition, we have this notion of the Baudillo. But these days, if you ask most people, what is a Baudillo, they'll say, oh, this is an abandoned plot of land somewhere, right? It's a vacant plot of land. Meaning that people don't understand that at least historically, this was a community land. It wasn't either individual ownership or state ownership. It was community ownership. But what I think has been lost is this dimension of the community as part of the broader public, we have reduced the notion of the public to the notion of the state, right? So to rescue this notion that there is a level for community direct action, planning, participation is crucial. And so, and basically to give a new meaning to the notion of the common good, learning from the political process of the common provides us with some elements for that. But we should go beyond the land itself. We have also to think in terms of what I called shared common power, coming up with a new legal political framework in which a widened political representation system can live together with some scope for direct action. And there's a lot that can be achieved there, recognizing other factors and finding a better balance there between, the stakeholders and the open and vested interest and all that. So there's a lot to be gained by, this more articulated and redefined governance framework, in fact. And I'm very curious to hear more about the laboratory and, this legal support. And I'm all in favor of an element of a more radical political action, which I think does not necessarily need to be outside of the legal order. My point is we can think of a redefined legal order that can accommodate this dimension of direct action. It's not necessarily, to be illegal, provided that we make the necessary changes to think of a broader public sphere, which is not reduced to the state sphere. Norberto also, I think I've been following the situation in Argentina and all the Thomas de Tierras, Guernica the other day was such a shameful episode, 4,000 policemen evicting the community. But Argentina is also a very good example of the importance of the legal order, and also of the limits of the legal order, because Argentina to this date is one of the few countries in the whole of Latin America that has not, at least nominally, incorporated the notion of the social function of property. It doesn't exist in the constitution in Argentina. There has been, progress, especially at the regional level, some local laws, some regional laws. But the irony is that now that we have a progressive national government committed to interfering in the land market, they even came up with this very exciting national land policy, right? And the notion of value capture, the notion of all sorts of elements are there. But at the same time, we have a conservative judicial power that didn't think twice before ordering the removal, the eviction of thousands of people in these informal settlements. So we have to find a balance there, between the legal framework, the institutional political framework, and the conditions of social political mobilization. So this is a very elusive combination, but if they don't go together, we don't go far. We keep repeating the same mistakes. But thank you very much. The contributions were fabulous, and I'll be, taking notes and exploring all the suggestions you gave.
Thank you, Edesio. And just remember, we will share with you the Edesio's thematic paper draft, so you can make all the comments you want, and also the presentation. And yes, now we have Nelson that wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit also regarding the common goods and the commons and the perspective, we think is important for the vision, the right to the city. When I mentioned we have experienced the policy paper, Right to the City, Habitat 3, in this working group, I was in one member, the other colleagues from the Global Plataforma also was in this group. like Ana Falu, one example. No, Eva Cuenca is now the consultants. Also, the colleagues from Action Aid. No, so Alison Brown, no, from Cardiff is a collaboration, no, from WIGO that time. So we include in the vision the right to the city. No, exactly this perspective. The city is a common goal. In that moment, exactly the perspective David mentioned, no, the city is a common goal, with the perspective to have a protection for one a good. No, we have in the law in special, no. The life is a good, no, to protect, no. Also, we make evolution for to have a environmental like a good, no, for to have a protection. And also, the economic perspective, have the property is a good, no, is with strong protection in your countries, in your law, in your legislation. So the idea, no, we have at that moment, we want to develop better, no, exactly how we can have a protection for one city, one space, no, where people living with a qualification as a common good, no. That is the territory is important. Now we think it's very important now in this territory, the public space. No, it's strategic territory for the protection in the perspective the cities are common good. But we want to go more deep, no, in special because we think we need to take the other similarity protections, no, in the collective rights. One example is the environmental rights. No, the environment is a good. And also the cultural, no, the cultural dimension. It's a cultural protection. Now we have it because the cultural also came in our international conventions about the cultural rights, or in our national legislation, we have a protection, the cultural rights. The cultural is a good, no, the patrimony, no, the cultural perspective, the cities, no, historic cities, cultural cities, we have the protection in this dimension. So the idea that it's a common goal is also to go for this level, no, the protection, but we need to have a qualification. No? We don't have a city with a lot of speculation of the land to be protected, so that it's a common goal. No, it's sure, but we need to have some qualification. The city we want, no, for to have one protection, collective protection in this perspective, the cities are common good. But in the other way, David bring one for us an important contribution, reflections about what's mean common. No, it's more the perspective, the community, no? to have a relation, connections, management, one space, no? One cultural. I think we need to think to have these two dimensions, no? The perspective, the good protections, and the common with the management, more engagement of the habitants, no, the citizens in microcosm, like a neighbor, like Jenny Jacobs, no, make many experience for us in your technology, your books. In New York special, and also for the macrocosmos, exactly the cities or human sentiments. No, I think we need to. It's a challenge, you know, for us. No, it's very hard to do this, but I think it is one way. No, we can have the next steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Nelson. I just put on the chat like the first draft of Edesio's paper, so you can make all the comments you want. I don't know if anyone else wants to say something. Also, maybe you can let us know what can this thematic paper, how can this thematic paper help you, your organization? How can it be like more concrete so it can help the organizations? Edesio put his email address so you can also contact him. Yes, I don't know if anyone else wants to share something, initiatives, ideas, actions, examples, thoughts. Or maybe Edesio wants to say something else. No, it's okay. Okay.
Just to thank you all, It's been very exciting for me, and I learned a lot, and I'll look for all the references you made, and I learned a lot as well. And I hope that by the time you read the second draft, many of your comments will have been addressed to some extent. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so just, we will share the chat too, so all the exchanges will be recorded. If no one else wants to say something, maybe we can go to the final part. So maybe Lorena can now give us like sum up of the webinar and give us the next steps.
Sí, gracias. Gracias, Julieta. Gracias, Edesio. Y muchas gracias a todas y a todos por excelentes contribuciones en el debate de hoy. Como saben, esto es parte de un proceso colectivo, un proceso en varias etapas. Y sabemos, los desafíos son enormes, ¿no? Nos estamos poniendo una tarea grande, pero creo que por eso nos llena de entusiasmo y nos llena de energía para pensar estas cosas que son críticas, ¿no? Han sido críticas mucho tiempo y se vuelven aún más críticas en el contexto de las múltiples crisis que estamos viviendo hoy. No voy a hacer una conclusión de todas las cosas que aportaron, porque fueron muchas y todas muy importantes. Simplemente decir que parte del desafío grande que tenemos y que ustedes mencionan, creo que se trata básicamente de reinventar la democracia, ¿no? Y reinventarla en el sentido de radicalizarla. O sea, no puede haber otra manera de reinventarla que no sea radicalizándola. Y obviamente esto tomará distintas formas en distintos contextos, ¿no? Culturales, sociopolíticos, pero creo que está claro que esa es la disputa. Y está claro también, y creo que este es el aporte de nuestra visión desde el derecho a la ciudad, que eso tiene que tener necesariamente una visión territorial. Y esto es algo que la ciencia política clásica e incluso contemporánea no discute, o no discute mucho. Dos cosas no discute. No discute lo local, lo municipal, en general se enfoca en el Estado-Nación, y ahí tenemos un primer problema. Y el segundo es que no entiende, no discute, no incorpora la dimensión territorial, ¿no? Entonces, no solo lo local, municipal, sino la dimensión y la complejidad territorial. Y creo que ahí tenemos aportes muy importantes que hacer desde todas las experiencias que están comentando. Y entonces, ¿cómo desde esa visión y desde en diálogo con los comunes y la experiencia que se están desarrollando en tantos lugares, expandiendo, redefiniendo el sentido de qué es lo común y qué son los bienes, ¿no? Hay una redefinición de qué son los bienes, qué es lo común y por lo tanto qué es la gobernanza de eso y qué es lo público. Creo que desde ahí, y es lo que nos propone Edesio, desde ahí podemos tratar de forzar y expandir el marco sociojurídico de eso y sociolegal. Y eso supone necesariamente no solamente la dimensión legalista y de la justicia, que es fundamental, sobre todo en términos de propiedad y tierra, como sabemos, sino más allá, ¿no? en lo sociopolítico, en la organización, en la acción directa, etc. Entonces creo que tenemos muchas cosas que aportar desde las experiencias concretas en las que ustedes están involucrados. Hay muchos debates y tenemos aquí varios colegas que están trabajando en este tema y publicaciones, experiencias como las que nos comparte David y otros colegas que están justo ahora pensando en todo esto. Entonces creo que la posibilidad de tener estos diálogos y de ampliar estos diálogos es fundamental y seguiremos trabajando en eso, aún después de la publicación del paper, ¿no? Creo que esto es una iniciativa y un proceso para el mediano plazo y tendremos que colaborar en eso. Básicamente, los siguientes pasos incluyen el documento abierto hasta una semana más, digamos, hasta el próximo martes, para que puedan enviar comentarios, sugerencias por escrito o referencias. Creo que salió muy claro también la necesidad de enfocarnos en casos concretos y en las tensiones y en las contradicciones que surgen desde ahí, ¿no? Incluso para el marco teórico. Creo que eso es fundamental y nos va a dar muchas pistas, ¿no? De por dónde seguir estas discusiones y recomendaciones. Entonces, hasta el próximo martes. Y tendremos después un segundo borrador que Edesio estará preparando hasta finales de noviembre y volveremos a circular ese borrador entre la gente interesada para poder hacer todavía algunas observaciones finales. Y la versión final de este paper y de los otros dos que están siendo elaborados estará en enero, a fines de enero. Entonces, agradecerles nuevamente, invitarles a este jueves. Tenemos también otra sesión, otro webinario sobre otro de los temas que se está elaborando un paper, en este caso sobre el derecho a la ciudad y el COVID. Y la propuesta es que estos papers, los tres, sobre cambio, sobre ciudad como bien común, el COVID y el cambio climático, los entendemos conectados, ¿no? De manera conectada y en diálogo. Entonces, si están con disposición e interés de participar, les invitamos el jueves. Están los datos por ahí en la página para que puedan sumarse y hacer contribuciones también en este debate. Gracias nuevamente y contamos con ustedes para lo que sigue de este proceso de aprendizaje colectivo. Saludos.
Gracias, Lorena. Si desean solo poner su cámara un minuto, así tomamos una foto del webinario para el recuerdo de este proceso. Y si quieren todos prender sus cámaras un ratito, los que puedan. Muchas gracias por haberse sumado y el jueves tenemos otro webinario. Así que vengan, se pueden inscribir. Está, no sé quién toma la foto, yo también la voy a tomar.
Ok.
Adiós.
Giovanni, cuidado com o furacão aí, hein?
Gracias, Edesio, por todo el trabajo, por la presentación.
Muchas
Thank
gracias.
you. Gracias. Chao, chao.
Gracias a la traductora también por el apoyo.
Sí. Muchas gracias, Flor.
Gracias, Julieta, por facilitar
Gracias,
el debate,
Julieta.
que estuvo muy
Sí.
bien. Gracias por sus aportes. Saludos.